Welcome to the Freedom to Learn podcast. I'm your host, Ginny Gentles. This season, we're diving into what it means to return education to states, communities, and families. And we're exploring what becomes possible when education is freed from union dominance and federal control.
My story is I'm a collegiate volleyball coach for 20 plus years. Unbeknownst to me, when I took the job at San Jose State, that there was a male on our team, and our athletic director and the sport oversight and our head coach would only support the male, was not supporting the females, not protecting their safety, their wellness, their privacy.
We're joined today by Melissa Batie-Smoose, former San Jose State University women's associate volleyball coach, and Vernadette Broyles, Melissa's attorney and the founder of Child and Parental Rights Campaign, for a powerful conversation about courage, consequences, and the future of women's sports and Title IX. Last week, young female athletes, policymakers, and other advocates for protecting women's sports held a rally outside the U.S. Supreme Court, while justices heard arguments in two cases, one from Idaho and the other from West Virginia, that could shape how our nation defines sex-based protections. Those legal battles are not abstract. They're deeply personal, and Melissa's story shows us exactly why. As a longtime women's volleyball coach, Melissa risked her career to speak up when female athletes' safety, dignity, and privacy were put at risk by a male on their team. Her decision to file a Title IX complaint set off a chain of events that cost her her job, but also helped fuel a national conversation. Melissa, Vernadette, and I discussed the path forward, including why federal action matters regardless of the Supreme Court's decision, and how proposals like DFI's Respect Title IX Act aim to restore clarity to a law that was designed to protect women and girls, not erase them. Melissa Batie-Smoose and Vernadette Broyles, welcome to Freedom to Learn.
Thank you for having us.
Melissa, let's start with your story, and there are a number of different components to it. So I want to start with the women's safety aspect of your story. When you were hired as associate head coach of San Jose State University's women's volleyball team, did you know that there was a male on the team?
I did not know. The administration hid that from me. But quickly, the day I took beach practice, I knew there was lots of differences in this player.
This is not a new career for you. You've been coaching women's volleyball for a long time.
Yes, been in volleyball for 30 plus years, been collegiately coaching for 30. Also, played in college and played professionally beach for a while. And yeah, this has been my life.
So you show up at San Jose State University and quickly discover that there's a male on the team. What does that look like when you have a male on a female team? Because my understanding is that there's a pretty big difference between men's and women's volleyball when it comes to net height, right?
Yes. That is why the men's net is higher than the women's. Men and women are different. Men jump higher. Men are more physical. They're more powerful. They're faster. It's everything. Like, as far as we know, men and women are completely different. And that's why we have separate categories so that women can win awards and feel great about themselves. It's not just playing the sport. For women, it's to become leaders. There's so much that you're developing as a coach that the X and O's are like the minor parts. It's, developing the young women into strong females that can go on and be CEOs, doctors, lawyers, all the things that, help them get there, is playing and competing in women's sports and competing against other women.
Right. So it's not just about the safety; it's also the development of the young women. How did these team members handle having a male on the team? Were they informed?
They were not informed, and I was told as soon as I noticed. I brought it to the attention to the administration and the head coach, and I was told that I was not allowed to tell any of the players or any of the kids' parents that I was recruiting, or the kids I was recruiting, to come to San Jose State, or I would be fired.
That's an extreme level of deception.
They're putting fear, and it definitely works, you know? I built this career since I was straight out of college, and you know, then I was having to live with this every day and knowing it was destroying me. And it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, that am talking to parents and their kids are coming across the country, the world to come play for you. And they expect you to take care of their child. And I have a daughter, and you know, I have nieces and nephews and nieces that play, and you know, they want to be protected, and I'm lying to them. So that was just so hard to deal with, and that, you know, it was either lose my career or stand up and do the right thing. And I just had to do the right thing.
So we've talked about the risks to women's safety, to their dignity and their developmental opportunities. We talked about the difference in the net height. Let's talk about women's privacy. When we're talking about not just the women's sports, we're talking about women's spaces and sharing spaces with a male. What were you observing on that front?
Well, they're rooming on the road, and some of these players, at the time, I thought nobody knew, because we weren't allowed to share or our experiences or what we knew and didn't know. And so they were rooming with this male. This male is in their locker rooms, all the safe spaces that us as females enjoy. And Brooke Slessor was the person that always had to room with the male player. And I asked why. Behind closed doors. Oh, because Brooke Slessor's requesting it. And this was a lie. And we could have roomed this male player by himself. But they chose, no, we cannot. We have to room him with other females.
Well, that gets to a third category of this: women's safety, women's privacy, and then unfair treatment. Why was the male being roomed with a female, doing, I guess, what he wanted, rather than what Brooke wanted?
Yeah, that's the biggest problem in all of this is women, the females on the team did not matter. Their privacy, their safety, how they felt did not matter. They brought this attention, like once it came out, they were bringing the attention to the coach, the head coach, the administration of how they felt. And they kept being told, as myself, that we do not matter. That how do you think Blair feels? How do you think the male feels? The only thing that matters is that we accommodate the male.
Vernadette, did you have thoughts on this?
Unfortunately, the unfair treatment didn't stop there. There was preferential treatment in many other ways. The male player was not required to abide by the same rules that all the female players were required to abide by. I'll let you tell this, Melissa, because you're better at some of the exceptions made for and some of the conspiring that went on.
I mean, as little as didn't have to wear the same practice uniforms, could show up with different things on, and nothing was done about that. And other female athletes, there would be consequences for that. Like there's consequences for any rules, depending, could not show up to practice, could be late to practice. Those are just very basic things. Was allowed to participate outdoor, beach, and indoor, where other athletes that were being recruited for both were told they were not allowed to play outdoors anymore, that they had to focus on indoor. And then the biggest one of all, that you are conspiring with an opponent to throw a match and injure our setter. And that came out, and the administration, the head coach did nothing. It was swept under the rug. The Mountain West did nothing. The investigation was tainted by the lawyers that represent the male. And so they had that come out how they wanted. And, we're brushing that under the rug, that your intent to harm another athlete, a female athlete, and that you're throwing the match.
When was all this unfolding?
It's the 2024 volleyball season, and that was about when we played Colorado State was the opposing team, and the player that conspired with the male went on and transferred and is still playing. And any other case, if that was any other situation, would be banned for life. So that was about October of 2024 that the match against Colorado State.
And people might forget that there were teams forfeiting against your team at this point as well, which we hadn't really seen before, because that is giving up a lot to forfeit. And it happened how many times?
7 times that San Jose State was awarded a W. Boise State was the first team in our conference. Southern Utah was the first team overall, but that was out of conference. But Boise State was the first team to step up and refuse to play us. And they had 3 opportunities to play us, and they declined all 3. And one happened to be in the semifinals of the Mountain West Conference. They gave up everything. They gave up their opportunity to go on to the NCAA. They were tied for number 1 in the regular season, and they had every opportunity to win that conference and go on. And they did such a courageous thing by standing up and staying, strong in their values and really fighting for women in women's sports.
Well, speaking of being courageous and giving up everything, you risked your career when you decided to speak up and take action. Could you tell us a little bit about what you did and what kind of pushed you to that decision?
Honestly, I knew it was coming, but really what pushed me was Brooke Slusser. As a player and as a young adult, she had the courage to come out and join the Icons lawsuit. And we were sitting in a hotel room with the head coach and the other coach, which all are males on our coaching staff. I'm the only female, in a room. And she tells us, and the backlash and the type of rhetoric that was coming at her for how horrible a person she is and how she could ruin this team and how she could ruin the players and the whole program was just absurd. I just knew I had to stand up. And so I filed a Title IX complaint. It was about 35 pages long of all this stuff: the mistreatment, the safety, the fairness, the throwing the match, the conspiring to injure Brooke Slusser, all of it. And nothing was done about it. And 2 days later, I spoke out in an article in the Colette, and they removed me the next day from the program.
When you say you filed a Title IX complaint, that was with the university or to the U.S. Department of Education? What did that complaint look like?
I filed to the university, to the Mountain West Conference, and the NCAA.
Vernadette, do you want to give us the
Sure.
overview of Title IX and kind of what that means to file a complaint?
No, happily. So Title IX is the law that was passed. It was an add-on to the civil rights law that was passed in the 1960s, but this was the 1972 amendments to the civil rights law that caught the law up now to protect women, to protect against discrimination based on sex. And so the central purpose of Title IX was to give women and females in education equal opportunities. And that included in sports, because as we know, sports is such a key part of the opportunities of students. A Title IX complaint typically is filed, with the academic entity. They have an opportunity to investigate it, and then it would be sent up to the Department of Education, the Office of Civil Rights. Well, that didn't happen in this case. Melissa's Title IX complaint on behalf of the female athletes was largely ignored. It was not investigated or fully investigated, and it went nowhere. Whereas the male athlete filed a Title IX complaint against Melissa, and his complaint immediately was investigated, and action was taken against her. Findings were made against her. So again, the unfairness and the favoritism just continues all the way up through the organization.
What were the actions that were taken against you, Melissa? I mean, this was a bold move to speak up, and not just speak up, but to file this complaint and then to write about the complaint.
I lost everything. I lost my career. They removed me a minute before we were taking court for our match. And players were told right 30 seconds before, all in tears, wanting to not go play the match, and they forced them. And it's just, that's what that was the consequences for all that. And we're continuing to deal with that Title IX case, and I'm not even employed there. But they are pushing that. The state is pushing that to have the male have all these rights.
And the state is California,
yes.
Of course.
And backing it to no end.
So to be clear, in terms of what's happening legally, yes, we are defending Melissa in the Title IX complaint. It's an administrative complaint against Melissa by the male athlete. But we didn't stop there. We went ahead and filed a complaint against the California State University system with the EEOC, and we received from them a right to sue letter. And so then in September, we filed a civil rights complaint against the California State University, the Board of Trustees, in the Central District of California Federal District Court for discrimination on behalf of Melissa, for discrimination based on her sex in violation of Title IX and Title VII, because they took employment action against her, as well as for retaliation in violation of Title IX and Title VII. And her complaint is moving forward in the federal court system, where we are fairly confident that there's going to be some accountability here legally and exposure of what has happened here.
Okay, so just so listeners are clear, there are Title IX complaints on both sides.
Administrative complaints.
Administrative complaints. And then this lawsuit against the Board of Trustees of the California State University system
Correct.
That you're talking about. So two paths. I wanted to throw in the mix that right after the Trump administration kind of got their footing, the U.S. Department of Education announced an investigation into San Jose State University, like February of last year. So there was a recognition that something was afoot, and that's due to the courage of you, Melissa, as a coach, and then also Brooke and the other players who were taking a stance on this. Is there an ongoing lawsuit for the for Brooke against the university and Mountain West Conference? Is that still happening?
Yes.
Okay. So that's a lot for you personally to be keeping track of. And all of that's happening while you've lost your job. We've been talking about women's safety, the risk to women's safety. Can we talk a little bit about the personal safety risk that you've taken and experienced because of this?
Living in California, I guess that's the price you pay. But, the backlash in California, I was sitting at my kitchen table on an actual Zoom with the plaintiffs and everything, and I got shot at through my kitchen window and harassed in the community. Every time I was out, I would get harassed. But being shot at, then I no longer felt safe living where I was living in California. So we moved to Texas for our safety, for our family.
You're inside your home. And
Yes.
a shot was it a pellet gun? Like broke the window in your home?
I had a double pane, and luckily, because it didn't go through the second pane, or else that would have hit me right in the temple. It was a direct hit. The police officer said it came from about 300 yards away. So somebody professional had to have had that hit on me, or to, fear whatever their intent was.
I'm so sorry that that's happened to you. I feel like I don't want to say common, but there are just too many stories of violence in this space.
Yes.
And again, so much is happening. So we kind of forget, and we can't forget they shot at you after you spoke up and said males should not be on a female volleyball team.
Yes.
You said something that's just so obvious.
Such common sense, right?
Yeah. Vernadette, can you talk a little bit about the goals of the lawsuit? Like, what do you want the lawsuit to accomplish?
Well, first and foremost is justice for Melissa. I mean, restoration of her career, her job. She has been extraordinarily damaged. You know, she's in a prime of coaching, and to have her entire career to be destroyed. So there's some very serious damages. The strain and the stress, obviously, that this has been on her and her family, but also the changes within the system. We're asking for injunctive relief. We're asking for reforms, as well as restoration and the damages, monetary damages, reform of the system. That this would not not happen to another coach. And at some point, I do want to talk about the role of the coaches.
I previously worked at Independent Women's Forum and got to know Kim Russell, who was a lacrosse coach who was pushed out of Oberlin College for speaking up about the importance of protecting women's sports. So there's Kim, and then there's you, Melissa. Are there any other coaches who are speaking up about this?
Not that I know of. And that's been another one of my fights that my colleagues are supporting me behind closed doors. They're not allowed to even, they'll call me or message me saying, I can't even like your retweets or talking about protecting women in sport, that they literally can't even press like, or their job is threatened.
And so Ginny, so that's a huge part of the lawsuit, is to expose what is happening. But in this particular case, from the perspective of a coach who blew the whistle and who stood up on behalf of the women athletes. And, I have to ask, as myself, I was an athlete, probably like yourself, Jenny. Growing up, I'm okay.
I was a band geek, not an athlete.
I was a jock. I was a total jock, girl jock. And I'm a mother. I'm a mother actually of a 21-year-old woman in college. And we just have to ask, where are the coaches? Why? Melissa was the only female coach on this entire coaching staff. And if you look throughout women's sports, they're largely males who are coaching these young women. I'm sorry, but we can't find qualified women athletes, former athletes, to be coaching and be elevated into this position of leadership over our young women and mentors to them and role models. I have a problem with that, number one. But I have an even bigger problem at the idea of that. Why are we allowing, we have our generation on this call, those of us with much more power and influence, our coaches, why are they allowing the young women, 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, to be the ones standing at the gap, taking a stand, taking the hits before their lives are even started, to speak the truth and to stand up for women? I mean, shame on you, coaches. Shame on you who are hiding behind whatever, remaining silent, and allowing the young women to have to be the ones to stand in the gap. It needs to be us, and this really needs to be a call to action, that the coaches, the adults, the grown-ups, those who are entrusted with our young athletes to lead them, you need to be standing up and standing in the gap with them, upholding them, exposing what is going on, and taking the hits on their behalf, standing in front of them and taking some of the blows so that these young women do not have to take it all alone.
Melissa, I would imagine you have a similar call to action when speaking to coaches. What would you say?
My message is just to be courageous, just to, do what's right and protect women. I mean, we are coaching females. And so that to me is do the right thing. And, there is, when you tell the truth, there are consequences, but it's 100% worth it, because we need to save female sports for the future, for my grandchildren, for my grandnieces that are going to all play sports. My nieces played sport. Everyone, we want to still have females and to participate in sports and win and have those accomplishments. And if we don't stand up as coaches, there will not be a female category.
That's right.
And so the other thing is, it's really important for them to do this now. If we had coaches out there at the collegiate level that would not recruit these males, we would have less at the college. I understand at middle school and high school, it's not the coach's decision, but in college, it is the coach's decision to recruit that male athlete. But the problem is there's so many coaches out there that will do anything to win. And that is an issue.
This is an issue that has been taken up by the U.S. Supreme Court. I'd like to think that the coaches will stand up and not just have the young women and the Supreme Court do all the work for them, but perhaps this will be settled by a couple of cases that were just heard by the Supreme Court. You all were at a rally outside while those cases were being argued. I'd love to hear, Melissa, your observations from that day, from that rally, from that gathering of young female athletes.
It was an amazing day. You just felt the energy. Now we are not alone and that we're winning this step by step. And we outnumbered the other side. And it's just all the courageous men and women were there fighting this fight. And we're starting to get that traction. And we're going to continue that. And we're going to continue till, we win it at the Supreme Court.
There was clearly, based on videos that I saw, a huge gathering of supporters of women's sports. There were the opponents there. It seemed like they were intentionally trying to drown out the speakers.
Yes, they were loud, but compared to some rallies, they were less of them. We were the majority for sure.
Vernadette, could you share some of your observations of the arguments that were made that day?
I've gone back and I've listened to both oral arguments. I'm encouraged by the fact that I really do believe that we're going to have at least a solid 5-4 majority, possibly a 6, and there's an outside chance and maybe even a 7-2. Justice Kagan, who is one of the liberal, as you would say, justices, was really grappling with the argument of an as-applied equal protection challenge. I mean, it was this very, very clever argument to try to turn the law on its head, basically. I won't get into the technicalities. And she, as if to say, basically the other side was saying, well, it's okay to have sex-based categories because sex really is an objective category, and there actually are differences between the sexes. So we have to acknowledge that. But they were trying to say, but in our individual clients, individual circumstance, it shouldn't apply because there's no advantage here because he's done various things to change his body and blah blah blah. And so it was a very clever way to try to shoehorn it in, but it just, I don't think it was grabbing hold. And Kagan was really calling into question. So that was encouraging, but there was a couple things that were a bit discouraging. And one was how little discussion there was about the women athletes. Virtually no discussion about their privacy interests, about their dignity interests, and the sexually harassing environment that's created where you are vulnerable, you're changing, you're becoming naked. And for a male to be able to be allowed to just be right there with you, your privacy interests, your dignity, virtually no discussion of that. That really, really troubled me. The other thing that troubled me was the distortion of language. We had various justices that candidly perhaps should have known better, who was taking the bait of the curated artificial language that the activists in this arena, the gender activists, have created in order to create a false reality. Cisgender women versus transgender women. No. There's females and there's males. And those are the only two categories of human beings on the planet. And that's it. Creating this other language. What is it? Males born at birth and these kind this like so calling the male she because she is a trans woman. No, this is just a distortion of language that was very unfortunate to hear in the highest court of the land. Some justices didn't play the game. Alito and Thomas in particular. I believe even Chief Justice Roberts didn't, I believe. But we have to be careful. I would just say to our audience is it is not kindness to speak a falsehood. It is not kindness to endorse and affirm a false reality. Truth is always the kindness manner of speech. And it's certainly not kind to women when we're erased because a whole lot of male are given by language, giving the status of a woman. That's insulting to women. So I'm believing for a good outcome and decision, but I think that we have more progress to make to take back our language and take back the truth.
Melissa, thoughts? Any more thoughts on the rally on that day?
No, just staying hopeful, and we just need it's in numbers. We need more and more people to stand up for what's right. And like we talked about, the coaches, they have a huge impact in this.
I mean, young woman after young woman got up and spoke. We really are asking a lot of them. And it was a potentially dangerous situation, as we've talked about. This is potentially physically endangering. They took that risk. They were courageous. They got behind the microphone right next to the opponents who were shouting at them and trying to drown them out. If they can be courageous, then coaches can be too. So best case scenario from these Supreme Court cases would be upholding the state laws that protect women's sports. Is that right?
That's right. So for your audience to be clear, it was the state of Idaho who had passed a law to protect women's sports and West Virginia. And that's what we're looking for, is that both of those laws are upheld against the challenges based on Title IX. The plaintiffs brought challenges saying based on Title IX, but also on the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. And so I believe on both of those counts, both those laws will be upheld. It's just now to see what this decision is going to look like. I would really love it if Justice Amy Coney Barrett is called on to write the opinion. She's extremely, perhaps maybe the second of the bright. I mean, she's extremely bright, and she has a very scholarly grasp on equal protection, which we saw in the Scrimetti case, U.S. versus Scrimetti, and her concurrence there, where she, just beautifully and very intelligently explained why transgender or gender identity is not a suspect class, is not a protected class. It is not an innate and immutable characteristic, and so therefore really doesn't satisfy the requirements of equal protection. And so let's see, I would love it if she writes the opinion and she writes it very strongly on behalf of biological reality.
I would love it if she also does not use the term cisgender and trans girls, which is something she did during the arguments. So we'll have to see about that. But we still need more states to pass laws that protect women's sports.
Right now, there are 27 states, right? There are 27 states that have.
Right.
We need more.
We need more. The other option, and something that needs to be explored, is codification of President Trump's executive order on protecting women's sports and spaces, and a legal definition at the federal level, making the distinction between male and female, and just ending the Title IX regulatory ping pong that's been going on across the administrations in recent years. And so the Defense of Freedom Institute has what's called the Respect Title IX Act model legislation. And that's something that we're really hoping that Congress will take up and take seriously. Final thoughts on what you hope to see next, Melissa?
What else next? I continuing to fight this, but also I really know through this that I am still meant to coach and impact young females' lives. And I would like to continue to do that and have that opportunity.
You certainly deserve that. Vernadette, final thoughts from you?
Well, I think certainly for Melissa to be vindicated. That is our number one goal in all of this, and restored in all the ways that she has been violated and she's been stolen from. But from the larger perspective, that her call to action is heeded by the adults, by the coaches, and the laws are changed. You're absolutely right. Defense of Freedom Institute, you've been a leader in this arena for a number of years now. I mean, you have been allies with us and us with you. And I shout out to you. I mean, you led the coalitions across the country, raising our voices against these awful, Biden regulations that are being proposed, and now the legislation that you are championing. We applaud you. We stand with you. We have to have changes in the law that can't be just undone with the next administration and at the state level. So, I'm looking to see all of these things because I care about all of our women, our young women across the country. So thank you for your leadership, Jenny.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Vernadette, for your strong and courageous commitment to women's sports, to women's spaces, and to defeating gender ideology. And thank you for joining Freedom to Learn.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Freedom to Learn is a production of the Defense of Freedom Institute. Learn more about our work at dfipolicy.org. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Send feedback, questions, and episode ideas to podcast@dfipolicy.org. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, please follow and review Freedom to Learn on your favorite podcast app and share it with a friend.